Testing. Test. Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's great to see you all. We have a packed house here today, and I know that we have, just like Hannah mentioned, the symposium participants from Korea, from Japan, and some who are visiting locally as well. Could you raise your hand once again? Let's give them a hand. This is something about expanding the sovereignty of our Heavenly Parent beyond just our community. So thank you. Thank you. The organizer, I believe Okada-san and Keita-san, played a key role in that. Thank you so much, and I'm sure there are many, many more. So, this week, just yesterday, we celebrated the life of our dear brother, Herbert Brown. And it was a very beautiful event, a very beautiful ceremony, celebrating his life. And I think one word that came up was, he appreciated people. And there was nothing bad to be said. Everyone just came together to celebrate the goodness of our brother. And it makes me think a little bit about how much we don't share about the goodness of people while they're alive. So actually, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I was sharing this with my then pastor, this idea. And he says, what if we, before someone goes into the spirit world, the eternal world, we gathered everybody together, and then we just shared our appreciation for them. And then my pastor then said, that's a great idea. Maybe we can rent a coffin and have them lie inside while here. So that was interesting. But it does bring up an important point about appreciating people. And that's why we did the Gihan ceremony yesterday in the presence of our brother as he was laying in the casket, being able to share so he can hear kindness and benevolence, words of the impact that he had in our lives. So as we celebrate his life, there's a lot that came through my mind, and I'm sure it came through yours as well, about where we're headed next. It's a reality of our world that we all know, right? It's the one thing we can't escape. No matter what, there is going to be an end to this life. Adam lived to 930, but he died. Methuselah lived to 969, but he died. It's something we can't escape because it's a necessary, important part of growing to become who we're meant to be. So, I decided to speak on this topic. Have you packed your bags? Because the new realm we're going into is a bit different from the world we live in today. So the question is, are we ready to go? How many of you feel like you're ready? Oh, I saw one hand, and I saw 3 hands. Some of you are ready to go. But many of us may not feel that way. Because there's something that we know hasn't been completed. Perhaps we haven't become the person that we want to be, that we've longed to be, the person we know we should be. This is something that is talked about in the Bible. One of the very first time that death is mentioned is in the commandment that God gives Adam and Eve. And God says in Genesis 2:16-17, and the Lord commanded the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. So, here, God says, you will certainly die. But we know Adam lived to 930. So, clearly he wasn't talking about physical death. In fact, the devil, the serpent, tempted Eve and says, you will not surely die if you eat of the fruit. But this helps us to think a little bit about what death really is. Because we know that when Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of knowledge and good and evil, God couldn't even see them. They had lost their connection with God. And in this world, it's very important for us to understand this point about death and about hell. I share this story many times. When I was younger, I was obsessed with this point about heaven and hell. And I grew up in a Catholic school, and every Wednesday we'd have Mass together at school. And it was always about, where are you going? Are you going to heaven or are you going to hell? And hell was this eternally tormenting fire where you would live for all eternity. And I was scared. I was scared to go to hell because that was what I understood hell to be. But then when I started to study the Bible, when I started to study our true parents' words, it became very clear what hell is, what the afterlife is. And hell is the place away from God. So you can be alive, but still dead. You can be alive, but be experiencing hell, because God is the source of life. God is the source of all things. So when we separate ourselves from that source of life, we die. We give ourselves to all things that don't belong to God. So this past week, some of you who live near the Chonchimon, you know about the accident that happened at Blue Diamond. So there was in the intersection of Blue Diamond and Las Vegas Boulevard last week, Saturday, it was closed for several hours. It's because there was a driver who says was drunk. Just ran through the red light and 4 cars got into an accident. And in there, a mother was severely injured, but her unborn baby died. And later I read that another person passed away. So, in this world that we live in, tomorrow is never promised. You never know what tomorrow will bring. I'm sure they were either going to Smith's for the groceries or going back home. And they weren't expecting that to happen in that moment. And that's just how life is. And that's why I titled today's message, have you packed your bags? Because tomorrow is never promised, we have to be ready today. We have to be ready at any moment to go to this eternal world. So let's read from Holy Mother Han's words. She describes the essence of creation. She says, the Creator, Heavenly Parent, had a dream and created all things of creation, and finally created men and women in the Creator's image. Let them pass through a period of growth to reach perfection. This means the Creator desired to live together with all human beings with perfected hearts. The dream of the Creator, Heavenly Parent, was to lead the true parents and all the sons and daughters while living together in the kingdom of heaven, in the visible earthly world. And then when the true parents depart from the earthly world to the spirit world, Heavenly Parents will remain with them and guide the eternal world together with them. I put this up there because it summarizes. There are several pages explaining what she says, and I highly encourage you to read through them. But I was reading this, and for some reason, I was in the Chonchimon praying, and in that moment, I got a bit confused. I asked God, why did you create the earth? why do we have to go through this world before going into the eternal world? If God's dream was to have children whom God could love, reciprocate, that live with joy, and why do we have to go through this world, this earth? And I kid you not, I was reading, but I just got stuck there for about 45 minutes, just pondering over it. And throughout the week, I kept thinking about it. Why? Why? Why did He create this world? But very importantly, why would God want to come and live with us on this world? I couldn't understand. Of course, we understand the stages of growth. We have to grow our hearts before we go into the eternal world. We understand that. We have to grow. But why is that necessary? And very importantly, why would God come to the physical world, be involved in the physical world before the eternal world? And the first answer that came up, I think I was walking here, just trying to set up some tech equipment. And then the point of love just came up. God is the source of love, of eternal love. We describe it as 심정, this relentless heart to just love. That was the source of God's love. And so I'm sure when a couple is pregnant and there's a baby in the stomach, we've seen many times that they would go get an ultrasound, right? They want to see what's going on. Sometimes you already know the gender of the baby, but you go and you check. Is he doing okay? How's he doing? The mother is constantly rubbing the tummy to soothe the baby. And I'm sure if the parents could go to just see them, meet them in the stomach, they would go. This world is like our embryo, preparing us for the next world. And so God had this eternal impulse of love, and that's why He comes to meet us. But the question yet still was, why does the earth exist? And then it hit me. We learn from true parents that God is absolute, unique, eternal, and unchanging. Absolute, unique, eternal, and unchanging. That's like the polar opposite of me, or many of us. Absolute, unique, eternal, unchanging. And the world God created, the eternal world, is absolute, unique, eternal, unchanging. So, before we go into that world, think of it. We have to cultivate a character. We have to cultivate an understanding, a heart that is befitting of that world. When you go into a Japanese person's home or an Asian person's home, you take off your shoes, right? You don't walk in with your muddy shoes and you might get kicked out. You just don't. You come in respecting the rules and the essence of that home, that space. And God is a God who is absolute, unique, eternal, unchanging. And that is God's longing for each and every one of us. So when we're born, a lot of us are changing. One moment we think this, one moment we don't. One moment we love somebody, the other we don't. We see this in this world. So before we go into the eternal world, we have to cultivate our character, our personality, our heart, so that we want that to be eternal. Now imagine if you went to spirit world today. Not today, but imagine. And your personality was forever calcified, where you couldn't change anymore. Is that who you want to be? Not really. Are you where you need to be? Are you where you want to be? Eternally. That's why true parents talk about how difficult it is to change as a spirit. Because it is the eternal world. It's not just a world where you live eternally, it's the world where you be eternally. And so we come into this world allowing ourselves to grow. And God comes to this world to teach us how to be ready for the next world, to raise us. It's just like a parent raising their children, teaching their children to know of the challenges of the world, teaching their children to understand how to live and thrive in society. God comes to this world through the true parents. It came through Jesus so that we could understand, so we could know how we should live. That is the reason this world exists as it is. And the reason why Heavenly Parent, especially true parents, are so important. They're here to be our guide, to shape us, to educate us, to have the personality, the character, the heart that can be absolute, unique, eternal, and unchanging. I read a little bit about astronauts in space. And when I was younger, I remember when I was, I think, 8 years old, some missionaries from Women's Federation came to Ghana. And there was one sister. I think she was 18 or 20. I think it was around 18. She said she was going into school. She was from Japan. And she told us that she's preparing to go to be an air hostess. She wanted to be an air host. She wanted to fly the plane, be a hostess on the plane. And she told us that day, she says, if you want your dream to be true, you have to draw it out and put it on your wall and look at it every day. So then my brothers, my sister, and I, we all just, we drew for about a day. And then I drew a space shuttle. I wanted to be an astronaut. I just love the thought about space. This world that hasn't been explored, the vastness of it. And so I studied quite a bit about outer space. And I'm sure many of you know what happens when you go to space without being prepared. It's a different environment. It's a different world. It's not like our world. And some of you may think to yourself, okay, maybe I just get a space suit. I get in the space shuttle. It'll get remotely controlled, and off I go. That's not good enough. Some of you may know about the F1 drivers, right? Even being an F1 driver, you're not driving as fast as the space shuttle launches, but they need immense training. They say an F1 driver, their physical condition to be able to drive that car needs to be just as good, if not better, than an NFL player, physically. They need to be strong. But someone who is not prepared to go to outer space, the first thing you'll notice is the G-force as you go up. G-force is the gravitational force because you're going counter to gravity. So what happens is that you will get completely disoriented. Your body may not be able to handle it at all. Your senses will start to be completely discoordinated. And a lot of people black out. They just black out. I say a lot of people, I mean trained people black out. You need to prepare to go to outer space. And then when you get there, well, because you're in a world, you're in space, the vacuum, without gravitational pull, what happens is that a lot of people experience, and I read, 70% of astronaut people who trained, experience severe nausea, severe vertigo when they go into outer space. I forget the name, vestibular, pretty much eardrums loses coordination. They can't tell up from down. And not only that, when you move inside the space shuttle, your movements are different. Everything is a bit more pronounced. And so, if just going into outer space, which is not too far from here, requires that much preparation so we can live, so you can survive there, then I think we need to also prepare for the eternal world. We need to prepare, and we need to learn how to navigate that world when we're here. When I was younger, I read a book. I was 13 years old. 13 years old, right before I turned 14. It was the week of my exams. We wrote something called the BECE, the Basic Education Certificate Examination. It's something that all students who are in middle school write before going to high school. Your scores determine which school you go to. And it's very intense. Everyone's preparing for it from the moment you get into middle school. It's written by the whole West Africa. So I remember one night, I'm studying, but I couldn't help but think of this one book that everybody was talking about. There was this one book my classmates were talking about, and okay, I just put my book down, and I had that book. I borrowed it from a friend. This was around 10 p.m. at night. I was alone in my living room. And the book was about a lady named Angelica Zambrano. Some of you may have heard of her. So I was 13 years old reading this book. This story is about this young girl who dies, goes to the eternal world, experiences it, and comes back to life. And she writes a story about it. Feel free to read to learn more about it. But I remember very key details. When she arrives there, this man shows up, glowing, smiling, welcomes her, and takes her into a space, a place that was beautiful, glorious. So much so that she wanted to stay there forever. She didn't want to come back to earth. And that ends up being the testimony of a lot of people who had near-death experiences. They don't want to come back, at least those who went to a good place. So Angelica goes to this realm. This man teaches her, shows her different valleys, the golden waters, all of that kind of stuff, a lot of flowers. Shows there's a specific room, dining room, where this man, who she's assuming was Jesus, where he says the central figures of the ages, the prophets, we're talking about Abraham, Jacob, Moses, that is where they dine together. She just showed the different places. And then she said she wanted to stay here. And then this man, Jesus, told her, you can't stay here. It's not your time. I need to show you something before you return back to earth. And he takes her to a place very dark. And there was a very wide gate, very wide road, path. Some people were walking, some people were running. And beyond that gate were screams, were torments, sounds of torments. People were running, people were walking, and the path was wide. So she didn't want to go in there, but he says, I need to show you this. And he brings her in. And then there are many different levels, stages. One funny thing was, she describes on one level, she saw the devils with whips and doing the moonwalk. Well, she didn't say moonwalk, but she says they were doing some movement where looked like they were moving forward, but they were moving backwards. So I'm assuming that's the moonwalk, right? So she meets different people that you may recognize in life. But what surprised me the most, she went to level 3. Jesus told her, "There's someone I need you to meet." And he takes her to this one room. And there was a gate. And behind that gate was an older woman. Angelica is trying to look through and see who that was. And then she notices, she writes, "That was my grandmother." But she was questioning then in that moment, wait, no. Grandma was a great person. Grandma was always kind. Grandma always did good things. Grandma went to church. And then this figure, who we're calling Jesus, told her she was a great woman, but there was someone she couldn't forgive in her life. And that is what brought her here. If you can't forgive, you can't be forgiven. So it made me think a lot about my life then. Now it was 2 a.m. in the morning. And I'm reading this book, and I finished it. It's a very short book. I'm sitting in the living room, and I'm just scared. Because if this was the living room, this was the path to go to my room or where I slept, and then the light switch to turn off the living room light was over there. Oh gosh, I've never run faster in my life. I just wanted to be next to someone. I shared a bed with my brother. But it made me think very deeply about the eternal world. What awaits us in that world? And how do we need to prepare for that world? And I think deep down inside each and every one of us, we all know what we could do better. I know. I know what I need to do better. I know whom I need to love more. I know whom I need to say sorry to. I know the things that I need to do, and I'm sure there's so much more that I don't know. And everyone who's here and here, I'm sure many of you can recognize those things in your life, those moments in your life, the things that you could do better, the things that could bring your heart closer to God, closer to our Heavenly Parent. You know, maybe it's on a Tuesdays at 4 p.m., 4:40 p.m. But how much do we actually take action towards that? Because like we said, tomorrow is never promised. Tomorrow is never promised. The lady who was driving her child to wherever she was going didn't know that that may be the last day for her child in this world. Some of you may have heard of Charlie Kirk, who passed away. He didn't go to the university in Utah thinking that may be his last day. So that's why this phrase becomes important. Living each day like it was your last. And I know in secular culture, it's been like live a party. But truly, if we understand the eternal world, where we're going, and that what we sow on earth, we reap in heaven, what are we sowing? What do we want to reap in heaven? If you plant tomatoes today, you're not going to get avocados in heaven. You're getting tomatoes, right? So the question is, what are we sowing today in our lives that we would be happy with in the eternal world? Because true parents, when they talk about the spirit world, they don't talk about this place that's tormenting you in fire, getting whipped by whatever it is. They talk about an eternal world where you are in the state you left this world in. A state of, for some, resentment. For some, agony and pain. Because in that world, God's presence is even stronger. So you may think your conscience is strong today or not so strong, but when you go to the eternal world, you are juxtaposing your existence to that of the absolute standard. So much so that you can't even come before God because you feel inadequate, inept for the things that weren't sown on earth for the eternal world. So, we all know what we need to do, and more that we don't know that we need to do. So the question is, how do we change? Okay, I know what I need to do, so how do I change? How can I prepare myself? What I've come to find, the first thing is to pray to God about that thing. God says, ask, seek, knock, and you will get the answers. Ask God for help. God is there to help you. Ask. And I guarantee you, every single time I've had a struggle with something and I pray to God, I got a clear answer. It may not be what I wanted to hear, but I got a clear answer. And that was, I needed to love. And I needed to put my pride aside. So it's so important. If you want to change, first you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to do something you're uncomfortable with. But if you want to change, we have to pray. Then we have to humble ourselves. And we have to take action immediately. Don't give any room for anything to change that inspiration. Because in that moment, you're filled with the Holy Spirit, and God is going to work through you to overcome any obstacles that you had in your life. And so please pray, humble yourself, and take action. And this we can read in, it's actually James. It says, James 3, James Oberg. James 4, 6 to 7, it's not Genesis. James 4, 6 to 7, 6 to 10, it says, but he gives us more grace. That is why Scripture says, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Humble yourselves before God. It's so hard to change because we want to remain who we are, keep our identity. But God is saying, just let go. Because if something is in that cup, nothing else can go into that cup. We have to empty it to allow God to fill it. That's humbling ourselves. And God will help you. He or she will lift you up. So, before I conclude, we'll get to that reflection question in a second. When I was younger, heaven or hell, the thought about where I would go was so important to me. Was so important. But very importantly, I was thinking about where I would go. Can I be happy in the eternal world? Can I live joyful, without pain, without remorse, freely, lovingly? I was always thinking about where I would go. But when I was praying, before, I always wanted to be where God was, because that was the kingdom of heaven. I wanted to be where Jesus was, where true parents were. But the more I prayed about this, it became very clear to me. Where is God? Where are true parents? They're not out there living a life of luxury. They're not out there living a life of total joy without suffering.
They're not out there just living in this golden kingdom that we think. Heavenly parent and true parents are right there with us in our suffering. Because until every single soul goes to the kingdom of heaven, it will not stop. That is the total salvation. That is the promise that God has to each and every one of us. And so when we think about where we're going, where we're headed, let's not just think about ourselves. Think about your family. Think about your friends. Think about that stranger on the street. Where are they going? Because if you went to heaven by yourself, that would be a lonely existence. That is probably not what you would call heaven. Heaven is where God is. Heaven is where true parents are. Heaven is where Jesus is. Heaven is where your friends, your family, whom you love are. So, when we think of this eternal world, let's extend our hearts and our mind to everyone. And that is the call that heaven has for us. It's to go out to the world and to bring people under heaven's embrace, to understand their identity as a child of God. That is heaven. Heaven, right now, is with the people who are suffering. Heaven is right now with the people who need God most, because that's where heaven is. That's where God is.
So, let's have this heart of total mobilization and total salvation as we prepare for the eternal world. So at this time, I'd like us to just reflect on these questions. So I've been teaching youth ministry for quite some time. Over the past decade, almost every winter workshop, we would ask this question to our youth. It was called the epitaph activity. Epitaph is when you die, your gravestone. This is what are people saying about you? What do you want them to remember about you? What is the legacy you want to leave behind? And we'll have them write a letter. And it was always very moving and touching because you then contend with your existence beyond the physical realm. So right now, I'd like everyone to just, in your silence, reflect on this point. Where are you right now? Where are you headed? What do you know you have to do to be where you want to be? So let's just all reflect on this together now.
All right. Please thank your partner. Just thank them. How many of you recognize the things that you could do, you could work on in your life to become even better of a person? I think maybe 30% of this room, everyone else is going to heaven. I see. So, as we work together, as we work on ourselves to develop and grow, I wanted to read a passage from the book, but I'll save that for the future. But the key essence was, we have to become like true parents. We have to become like true parents. When you look at the life of Jesus, are we living up to that standard? When we look at the life of Holy Mother Han, are we living up to that standard of our dear true Father? These are people who lived every second of their life for the sake of heaven's will. So, whatever it is, whatever it takes, please make a commitment to growing. Please make a commitment to inviting God into your life. Please make a commitment to humble yourself so that your existence can fulfill the very purpose that God brought us or brought you into this world. And sometimes it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. On Thursday, I was at the night vigil, and usually we have a lot of young people, older members gathered together to pray, and we were doing Chanyang. And after Chanyang, we do this, hallelujah, right? And when I look at the young people, a lot of the spiritual academy are here. They do this every single day. Not just night, was a morning, weekends, they're praying. And as we were doing hallelujah, right in front of me, don't worry, that's God. That happened. I was joking. Was this brother Timmy. And I could see him. He said, hallelujah. And then at one point he was like, his mouth was open. Oh. In that moment I could feel, wow, he must be really tired. He had gone witnessing the whole day, but he came back, he came here to deepen his relationship with God, to set a condition for victory worldwide. It's not just him. There are others around the room just pushing themselves, right, to grow. And I know myself, when I stand in the back, we have this section of the night vigil where we sing the fight song of the whale, right? So, it's like, it's spirited. Everybody is just, I kid you not. There are many days where I'm in the back, and then everybody is just screaming, moving their hand, and I'm doing the same thing. But then I almost just fall down. It happens so many times. And I just aren't we supposed to stay awake when we stand? So I understand Timmy. Timmy. Let's give a hand to Timmy. There you go. So sometimes it's difficult, but God sees it all. God sees it all. Every effort we make, maybe it's seeing someone on the street and helping them out. Maybe it's going to the grocery store. Maybe someone drops something, just helping them pick it up for them. Maybe it's just greeting somebody at Sunday. Maybe it's sitting with someone who's alone, starting conversation with someone who you feel could use some encouragement. Right, we talked about that yesterday at Uncle Herbert's Songha. So let's all make this effort together to grow, to become true children of heaven, so that the character, the personality, the heart that we sow here on earth will be what we want eternally in the eternal kingdom. Thank you very much.